Hello, and welcome to the only podcast where the intro jokes are as McClunky as some of the writing the Book of Boba Fett. I'm Matt,
I'm Luke.
And I'm Max.
and this is Force for Thought.
I'm going to be very scattered, which is appropriate for the Book of Boba Fett review.
There we go. There's the
say that, tie
intro.
it in.
There's the intro. All right, hello again. Today, we are reviewing the Book of Boba Fett. We all did a rewatch, and a couple weeks ago, we talked about our TV shows ranked in the Book of Boba Fett. For Luke and I both, we ranked it at number 7, and for Maxwell, he ranked it at number 9. And it was very divisive, even though we all kind of have the same... I feel like I'm very split. Luke really likes it.
I like it. Yeah.
Quite a bit. Max does not. He thinks it's doing bad things for Star Wars. And I'm somewhere in the middle where I guess I'm not a huge fan, but I don't... Man, I don't know, because I have 2 pages of notes, and one and a half of them are negatives. So who am I to say, I guess, anything? So we'll dive into it. I think the way we can structure this, just like we did with Obi-Wan a little bit, is talk about the positives and negatives and kind of an overall, I guess, a couple sentences or something if you want, like opening thoughts, opening remarks about the Book of Boba Fett. If anybody wants to go first, I feel like you guys both have pretty hard
Yeah, I'll
feelings.
take it.
Noble of you.
I loved rewatching the show. I do not like the Book of Boba Fett as a show that much, and I wasn't dreading rewatching it per se, but I wasn't looking forward to it like I was with our Kenobi rewatch.
Yeah.
That being said, I absolutely loved rewatching it. Every single episode felt like it went quicker than the one before it because I just really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
When you take away the pressure of watching it the first time and you're hoping for a really like great story and all these different story threads to come together and they don't, it is disappointing, and as a show, it obviously suffers for that, but there is still an incredible amount to enjoy in the Book of Boba Fett that goes beyond just the sloppy writing.
Yeah, I'll kind of transition between the two, I think, maybe then. I agree. I do agree with you is that I feel like watching it a second time, there was moments, I felt no pressure in comparison to watching the first time. I knew exactly what was going to happen, and I think the first time watching it, which is very fun. Max and I watched every episode together. It is a very fun thing just to watch Star Wars on a weekly basis. We always talk about that. But I think there was a lot of pressure of not being like, oh my God, Tusken Raiders again? And so it was a lot less pressure doing that. With that being said, I noticed a lot of other things I liked and a lot of other things that I disliked on the second time as well. So it is still a really big mixed bag. But I do tend to agree with Max that it is doing kind of bad things for Star Wars in the fact of like, you know, exploring characters that don't need to be necessarily explored or maybe left or better to mystery. But I think it was more fun the second time around, weirdly. Maxwell.
I do agree, actually, with a lot of what Luke was saying. On my rewatch, I did dislike it less. And you're absolutely right. When you're rewatching something and you know where it's going, you kind of have less of that like nervous, anxious anticipation, and you can just kind of enjoy the highlights a little bit more. So I did get to kind of enjoy the highs of the show without hating the lows as much.
Mm-hmm.
That said, you can't ignore the lows. I mean, we all acknowledge that they're there, right? But it was... I also kind of agree with what Matt said because it did kind of highlight a couple things. I was like, oh yeah, this is like a really fun sequence, but it does also, upon rewatch, knowing how it ends, also highlight a couple more
Negatives.
like not plot holes, but just like inconsistencies and
Like, why we can get into it, I guess, but like why does he go in to start, you know, the final battle happening at the bar and not Jabba's palace, a place that is further away from all the people that he's trying to protect?
Yeah.
Because I have that written in my
That
notes.
was glaring to
because
me this time.
the mods said we're not leaving,
Yeah.
and then Boba Fett was inspired by that, so he's like, okay, cool. Well, you guys go get this part of the town, and then they left.
Yeah, I know. I know there was a lot of things like that
Like
this
if I was
time
Boba
around.
Fett, I'd been like, yeah, sure, we'll stay here. You guys have to go cover that part of the town, and I'll be right here, I promise. And then run back to my palace.
I think something about the show that I've realized the second time is that we talk a lot about how the Book of Boba Fett was presumably potentially going to be Mandalorian season 3, right? And then they were going to do a different Mandalorian story per season going forward. And I think that still is a possibility, but I also think that there was a couple other weird things that I'm like, it might have been a bigger problem, where I almost feel like they had a cohesive story, and I feel like they had to go through significant rewrites, and that's why some things don't make a total sense. Because I feel like a lot of the writing in no way makes sense if you're going to sit down and write something to be like, yes, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and instead I feel like we had to rewrite it. I could be wrong, and I'm sure I am, but beyond the Mandalorian season 3 theory, and which is why we get 2 episodes of Mandalorian within this show. And it's not a B storyline, which like it should have been. I also have a feeling like, and maybe this is just because I wanted it to be, but like Kira's syndicate feels like it should have been within this. And I could be wrong, and I don't know, and I don't know if that timeline would fully make sense, but I feel like rewatching it, the villain, there's practically no villain. The Pike Syndicate is underdeveloped and so weird. And part of me was thinking that this could have been a tie-in for that.
With Crimson Dawn.
Yes. And instead, they had to rework it because they were going to do a Lando show. And we just found out as of this record a couple days ago, that Steven and Donald Glover are writing the Lando show. And so, that's been obviously a little dicey over the past couple months, maybe a couple of years. But like, I don't know. Maybe that's just on the top of my brain, but like how much more sense would that make? And then I feel like they were like, okay, so we can't rewrite the first couple episodes because it's so involved with this. But what we can do is stick Cad Bane randomly at the end. Because why is Cad Bane not the main villain the entire time?
Mm-hmm.
And how much more effective would it be if the first episode started with a duel? I don't know how this is necessarily work, but like they have 2 duels in the last episode. And it's like, whoa, that doesn't pay off anything because it would have been so much better if that happened in the first episode.
What are the 2 duels? The Boba Fett Cad Bane one?
Yeah, in the beginning of the episode when they're about to fight, and then I think it gets distracted, and then at the very end when he ends up killing Cad Bane, quote unquote, maybe potentially. Anyway, that's just my thought about the Pikes and the whole. I just feel like this show might have been a rewrite altogether, and it could have been something vastly different, but instead we're left with kind of like these pieces of them kind of just stuck in Mos Espa as well. Sorry, if you guys want to have any thoughts to that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't fancy myself much of a writer, but even I have like a dozen ideas that I think would do a lot of favors for this show, and we can sit here and nitpick it all day. The fact of the matter is that the writing was not very good for one reason or another. I personally like to think Robert Rodriguez, the executive producer, he directed an episode of Mandalorian Season 2, the one with Boba Fett on Tython, and he famously, or maybe just famously in my mind, but he talked about in the gallery or in some other interview how he auditioned for it by taking his action figures and like making a little stop motion movie, and I feel like that is just the energy that he brought into Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like he came into the writer's room, dumped down a bucket of toys, and was like, this is what we're working with. We got Cad Bane, we got a Rancor, we got Grogu and Luke Skywalker, the Tuskens, one's a child, one has dreadlocks. We're just going to make it all work. Yeah. And it doesn't really, but if you look at it like you're just playing with a lot of toys, like, there are a lot of toys in this show, and it's a lot of fun. The scene with the Rancor, I kind of knocked it a couple weeks ago in an episode because it's kind of random. Like, Danny Trejo shows up with a Rancor, and it doesn't really come up again until the end when Boba Fett starts riding it. And, like, there definitely needed to be a lot of other development of Boba Fett, like, training with it and maybe even just looking at it once or twice more. But when you take away the pressure of how this is going to be paid off and just experience that scene, and Danny Trejo's like, yeah, this is a Rancor, you're like, that is a really cool Rancor. Like, this is pretty cool. I liked it a lot more the second time.
Do you know what Robert Rodriguez directed besides like Book of Boba Fett? Just
I know nothing about him. No.
So he directed Machete, which is why Danny Trejo's in
Big
this.
friend.
And he also has super hardcore rated R movies like Machete, like From Dusk Till Dawn, which are great movies. Robert Rodriguez is also a great director, but he also directed Spy Kids. And so, can you not see that with the mods now, though? Like, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but like,
or like some of the sequences in Jabba's palace with the droid with like all the different arms and the knives and everything.
Feels
the chef droid, that was
the
awesome.
Chef droid,
there was so
Very
much
cool.
amazing creature and droid design in this show.
For the scorpion necks, those two.
That I will give it. It feels a lot different than like Mandalorian even too with the
And
the
it
creatures
does.
and stuff.
And I'm always talking about how whenever there's 6 human characters in a TV show episode, like why not make 2 of them an alien? And they did that in this episode. Like, there's a scene with Cad Bane talking to an Ithorian talking to a Pike, and that is just a scene that I would never imagine would come in live action. And I'm so glad it did. And there's so many like that, like the Trandoshan Syndicate, the Klatooinians, and the Aqualash. The fact that they exist, let alone are major characters in the show, is such a gift.
I love hearing your talk, Luke. Maxwell, you've been quiet. Or maybe we've just been stealing or
No,
hogging the mic.
I'm waiting for the positives and negatives.
Okay, yeah. So let's dive into some of the positives. Does anybody want to start with the positives?
Yeah, I'll start with some positives that I have because, like I said, the show has a lot of negatives, and I'm going to get into it here shortly. So it's going to sound like I'm just doing nothing but pooping on the show, and that's not the case. It does have a lot of positives. So starting with one of my favorites, Black Chrysanthemum. So something that I talk about all the time on the show are the comics. I love the comics, and Black Chrysanthemum, prior to Book of Boba Fett, was exclusively a comic book character. So it was really cool to me to see them bring a comic book character into live action. It felt like they were really, I don't know, not looking out for me, but I felt like I was being given a shout out. Like, hey, you guys read the comics, we're paying that off a little bit. Here's a character from the comics that you guys really like.
And what a perfect character within that story. Like,
yeah, it makes perfect sense.
It is really cool.
So I really like that a lot. Obviously, Cad Bane, Cobb Vanth, I really like that. I liked Fennec Shand a lot. We kind
Really?
of talked about it in a previous episode. Yeah, Luke, you said you weren't a big fan.
I do not like Fennec Shand. I think she's the worst part of the show. That's such a massive statement. Beside the writing,
I
don't like Fennec Shand. Is what I'm trying to say.
I like Fennec Shand. I thought she did good. I actually had no problems with her. I thought if anything, she was underused.
Yeah.
Underused is a good word, but like she's always just there in the scene to like say the things that Boba Fett could be saying. She's basically the same character as Boba Fett. Why does she need to be here?
She's a plot device more than an independent character.
I think like 90% of their dialogue is just plot. To be like, we need to do this, we need to do that. Oh, let's go here, let's go there, and that's the biggest problem.
Literally the one instance that I can think of where she has a line that's not just explaining plot is when the mod thanks her at the end in the final episode, and Fennec Shand says, "Manners, I like that. You're welcome," and then flies off. And it's like that's the one hint of personality I got from this character in 7 episodes.
Yeah,
that's true.
It's a little weird.
She is a major plot device for Boba Fett. But yeah, well, and I guess I agree because I guess all the parts that I really like are the parts where she does start to go off and do stuff on her own. Like whenever there's any action and she's sniping, it's always really cool. Obviously, the end when she strung up Mok Shai's and assassinated like all of the heads of the other families.
We
and
both
everything.
gasped when that happened.
Yeah,
that was shocking.
Still shocking
because the entire show had like a very like childish charm to it.
Very spiky.
And then she hanged this guy from the ceiling, and we're like, oh my god.
It's funny. It's a 180. Like
it went from Spy Kids to Machete real quick.
Yeah. Spy Kids to Machete. That's good. I have not that I want to scan through the positives real quick, but there's just I don't want to again consistently talk about negatives necessarily either, but I think it's really cool we get to see Boba Fett escape the Sarlacc pit. That's a huge thing, right? It's something we've been talking about forever. It is exactly kind of what we thought, which is
I know that's one of those things that you need to see, and it needs to not be that convoluted.
Yeah,
like he just uses his flamethrower and then kind of crawls out, and that's exactly what I wanted it to be, and it's kind of exactly what it needed to be, and I'm glad we got it.
The only thing is, I wish it was longer. Like they do that weird morph cut when he's just like his hand goes through the sand, and then all of a sudden he's like halfway out. I was like, no. I've been waiting for this. Let me see him come out. Like I want to see it all weirdly. But I mean, obviously that is like a super cool scene that is again really needed. I think I do give them a lot of credit for trying something new. Even though some of it doesn't work, especially on Tatooine, I feel like specifically like the mods would work a lot better on almost any other planet. It just does not feel like it gels with Tatooine specifically.
No, they're clean and colorful, and they have British accents.
Yeah,
that's not Tatooine.
No, it feels like Coruscant or anywhere else. Like it would make a lot more sense almost anywhere else. But then they also are like these cool hip people that are also, but they also have to like steal for water, and yet they have these insanely expensive motorcycles, I assume. Like, I don't know, just double up, sell half of them, and you just ride on the back if you're going to be together all the time.
That doesn't look as cool, though.
They also have really cool sets. Something that Max and I also nerded out about is being able to see inside of Jabba's palace, and something we haven't seen before. I wish we almost got more of that. Maybe don't fight in the cantina, because I'd like to see the other parts of the... With that being said, he probably doesn't want to destroy his own home. I get it.
You guys said that earlier, and I didn't get a chance to defend it. But I like that they fought in Lady Garza's burnt out cantina, because it's about Boba Fett defending Mos Espa, not defending Jabba's castle.
Yeah, but in order to defend them, but he's putting everyone else in danger. Like, he could go to
Everyone's already in danger. It's not you're not going to isolate the fight. The Pikes are coming for all of Mos Espa. They've infiltrated every area,
But they have to get Boba Fett, though. Like, it doesn't matter if he went to Mos Eisley. They're coming for him.
They don't care about Mos Eisley or Mos Espa or anything. They just want Boba Fett. Which is my biggest thing is, like, one of the, not to dive into negatives, but like to swerve in, swerve back out. The only reason they're after Boba Fett is because Boba Fett went after them. It's like there's no conflict there.
Correct.
Besides,
He's getting drugs out of the city. He's keeping it safe.
But that's the thing is that I feel like I don't want to go too much.
Don't tell me you're on drug side.
I was about to say,
drugs.
I'm about to dive into the negatives. Do we have any more positives that we want to highlight real quick?
Let me just go through real quick because
I feel like I haven't even gotten to mine.
I have one positive left, which is the Mando episodes are great. They're just misplaced, obviously.
Right.
It's not great when you're watching Book of Boba Fett, which I know has been oversaid a million times, but like you have a sigh of relief. Like there was 20 minutes into the episode when Max and I were watching, we were like, oh, I think we're just getting Mando, and we like it.
Right.
I think that's never a good thing. I love those episodes too. I mean, do we need Luke and Ahsoka to talk? Probably not, but I like it, and I feel like there's a lot of things like that I'm just like, yeah, they're doing it in a way that it feels natural and good versus Boba Fett, who has not changed at all and is stagnant as a character for 4 episodes up until that point. Anyway, those are my positives. I also, I like the armor. I like Fennec Shand a lot as well. She has nothing really to do, but I like the armor. I like the sets. I think they actually make Mos Espa a livable city, and so when they do have the fight at the end, it feels like you know where they're at the entire time, even though you have to sit through a chase that is so slow. I know that's been said to death, but it is
the mod chase.
When you're rewatching it, you're like, wow, this is weird.
Yeah.
But it feels like a ride almost, which is kind of cool, and I like the speeders and I like all that too. But I don't want to go too far in the negatives again, like I just said. But something that's weird, I just think of the chase is the mayor's right hand man, who was the ex-husband in Veep.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing is like the casting is an odd choice in this because you're casting comedy actors and trying to have them play it kind of straight, but it also be a comedy is just like I don't think the tone knows what it fully is, which I think is just one of a problem of the show where it's like. Again, rewatching it's like not necessarily a hard watch, but it is because you have to sit through the Tusken Raider stuff and kind of go. Flashbacks are never great when you have to rewatch something because you know the outcome of it, unless it's something spectacular. I just feel like I just wanted to point out the mayor's like aide guy is like it just I like that actor actually quite a bit. I think he's very funny, but it's just one of those things that I'm like I know who he is and I'm expecting something from him. Which is not to typecast, I guess. That's me typecasting somebody else, but it's just like I just feel like the show doesn't fully know what it is. Which is exactly what Robert Rodriguez, I guess, kind of does. He either has super hardcore rated R movies or super PG movies that are for kids, and it's like this is somewhere in the middle, which is an odd place to live. And
I feel like the Major Domo. I don't know his name, but I know that was his title. He was
That's a great title.
He was like a. On paper, I feel like it works a lot. And like I kept trying to like think about his character and a lot of his dialogue, and I didn't have like problem with his dialogue. I just had problem like you were saying like with the tone.
Yeah.
Like it felt like overall Boba Fett was a little too Spy Kids, so he was even more campy and like jokey and everything, whereas I feel like his character would have worked really well for the comedic relief if the show had an overall darker tone and he played it a little more straight as opposed to like as over the top as he was.
First scene when he's just like, oh, that's another misunderstanding, an understanding of a misunderstanding or whatever, and it's like I know that you're trying to do like a wordplay thing there, but it's just like I'm confused what I'm watching currently. I'm 2 minutes into this. You need to spoon feed me a little bit before I understand the tone.
Yeah, if that whole scene was just I don't even think it was the writing. I think it was just like directed a little more seriously and a little darker. Then that comedy would have hit a little bit better, honestly.
Yeah. All right, Luke, positive it up.
All right. A lot of this is just like small things that as a Star Wars fan, I'm glad to see in live action. Again, like Max Rebo. First time we've seen him since 1983. That was super exciting.
We all worried that he died too.
He was not in the.
I know he wasn't.
We did not see him
but
in the
we all
cantina
were
that
worried.
day. Yes. There was a male Twi'lek sex slave, which is great for gender equality in a galaxy far, far away. Haven't seen those before. That was exciting to me. The creature design I was talking about before, it's good across the board, but at the end of episode 1, that unique creature design with the 4 arms, but it's sometimes 4 legs, he was super cool.
Very cool.
I really like seeing that. And just their use of aliens instead of humans. Like 9 out of 10 Star Wars show, every Star Wars show besides the Book of Boba Fett, if you have your main character captured by the Tusken Raiders and there's another captive, he's going to be a human. And they made it a Rodian this time. And I appreciate that. Ahsoka refers to Luke as Master Luke.
Yeah.
I'm excited for what that implies. Is he a Jedi Master by in the order? Like, what does that mean? I had a lot of questions after that one throwaway line.
Put that one right next to that Obi-Wan has a brother.
No, this one's coming up.
I'm sorry.
It's not the same.
I just wanted to ruffle your feathers.
It's a Mandalorian thing, and so it feels odd to give credit to the Book of Boba Fett for it, but the N1 Starfighter is awesome.
Yep.
The scene of them rebuilding it and then treating it like a hot rod race car that was modded beyond belief, and he has to open it up and really let the throttle flow, and that was a lot of fun. I really like that scene. That's all I have for... Oh, we keep knocking the writing, and one of my favorite lines in the Disney era Star Wars is when Mando sees Cobb Vanth again, and he says, "I haven't seen you since you got rid of your armor. How have you been?" He says, "More careful."
That is a great line.
It does also have the best use of "this is the way."
I know. I said that last week. It was.
Yeah.
They say they have to go out there and face certain death, and Mando just says, "This is the way."
Yep.
Oh, I love that. And that's a great example of the Major Domo cutting a scene with comedic relief. That was a good example of that. I didn't know what you meant by when you were saying that the Major Domo was tonally misplaced in a lot of scenes. I thought he was great. I also don't really agree with this Spy Kids tone that you guys seem to have gotten from it. I thought the tone was pretty consistent. There were times with the mods that it's odd, and I get that, but like everything with the Tuskens, everything getting Slave 1, all the 2 Mando episodes, and that's 75% of the show right there. So
Floop is a madman. Help us, save us. I feel like that's a Spy Kids ref. I feel like the thing with Boba Fett is that when I wrote down what it essentially is about, I got really excited because it's basically right. Like Boba Fett is in a town where a drug syndicate is running spice, and you have a crooked mayor, Cad Bane, Black Chrysanthemum. Like everything I just said sounds titillating.
Like you can't miss.
I don't know how to say.
Oh, that's gonna be great.
Yes, and I'm just like, and somehow it's just like it's just odd. I don't know. It's just very weird because I'm like a crooked mayor. Boba Fett's in the town. It's great, right? And then I don't want to get like we can start and go into negatives. Max has got his phone out, so buckle up, folks. But I think like to get into some negatives, I think we weirdly covered a lot of mine.
because they're really positives, and you just needed the right perspective.
Yeah,
I might go the other way as well.
I think like we talked about Cad Bane maybe being the main villain. We don't know anything about the Pikes. We don't understand them. My biggest gripe with the show, though, I think, is just like that Boba Fett doesn't change. So last time we see him, he is in the Empire Strikes Back. He gets hit by Han Solo and falls in the Sarlacc pit. And up until that point, he's working with the Empire and is a bad guy. He is a bounty hunter. And then
He's an independent contractor. Bad guy has a lot of baggage with it.
All right, he's an independent contractor that chooses to work with space Nazis. So you decide what side he's on. But yeah,
I like that better than just labeling him a bad guy.
all right. But he's an independent contractor, and he's working with the Empire, and so presumably he's very bad, right? He's next to Vader when in Cloud City. He is like his right hand man, sort of in that movie. And then all of a sudden he gets out of the Sarlacc pit. Yes, the Jawas take his armor, but all of a sudden he's just like a new person right away. And that's the weird thing, is that he's not even an ounce of like bad almost. He's just as like learning and growing with the Tusken Raiders, who are also, like we talked about a couple episodes ago, are just like questionably bad. And that's like something I was weirdly looking up a lot of things, other people's reviews, and I feel like a lot of people like the Tusken Raider thing.
I liked it a lot more on my second watch.
Did you? See, to me, it's just like it is such a slog, and I think the payoff at the ending, which is I noticed it this time and not the last time, is I think that what the payoff is supposed to be, which I don't think works or lands, is at the end when he kills Cad Bane, he kills him with a gaffy stick, and I think it is new versus old, and so I think the whole setup is for him to get his new look, which is explained because we already saw him in Mandalorian when he has his new robes. And I think it's the gaffy stick is the final blow that he wins with Cad Bane. He kind of chooses this new way versus the old way. And instead of using a blaster, he is able to defeat Cad Bane with his gaffy stick. And I think the whole setup of the Tusken Raiders is for that moment. And that is a weird, long setup for a moment that is not obviously clear. And I'm still questioning if that is even the full thing.
I don't think it's necessarily new versus old, and I'm glad you said that because I actually do have that as one of my positives.
Oh,
right?
nice.
So supposedly, the whole, at least in my interpretation, the whole reason of the Tusken Raiders was because Boba Fett, who was I guess we were led to believe a lone wolf up until this point, learns that you are stronger with a tribe. He says that to Fennec Shand, and then during that final confrontation with Cad Bane bests him. He's on the ground. He's about to kill him, and he says, "Let this be my final lesson. Trust only yourself. Everything else is weakness." And then he takes out the gaffy stick, which he built as part of a tribe with the Tuskens, and he kills them with it. Air quotes around kills. We'll talk about that in a second, I suppose. To me, that's the message: is that no, you're not better by yourself. You are better as a tribe, and like the weapon that he built as part of a tribe has basically saved his life.
But we've already doubled down on that because we know he works better as a group now because we saw it in Mandalorian Season 2 when he's with Fennec Shand and he helps Boba Fett as well. Or he helps Mandalorian and stuff too. So I feel like that's a double down lesson already.
But we just see the effects of this character development. We don't see the character development of him being with the Tuskens and not trusting them and them not trusting him and what they go through and how they get slaughtered and how that changes him. That's his character development. It's just odd because it's not like over the course of the series. It's several years ago from the series, and it's just like flashbacks, and they're only in the first 3 episodes, and it's an odd way to present the character development, but his arc is still there.
I don't know. That's my biggest thing too. Is just like he wants to run this town, and then he gets to, and he wants to take over and rule with power, not fear. No, he wants what does he say? Respect. Thank you. Power. So but then at the end he's like, this isn't for us.
That's not part.
It's like, what the hell did we just watch? It's like it wasn't even
that
enjoyable.
It was just to set him up to constantly be at Din Djarin's beck and call. That's it.
Yeah.
In the future, Din Djarin's going to say like, "Hey, I need help. I wonder what Boba Fett's up to," and we know he's going to be free.
But you know what pisses me off is that they didn't do that in Season 3
of The Mandalorian. Because there was a good opportunity to
bring
in Boba Fett.
So there's no payoff. So it's like literally the show ends with him being like, well, then if not us, who?
Right.
Fade to black. Mandalorian Season 3 comes around. No.
And I feel like Lucasfilm always takes the wrong lesson from this, right? Because honestly, I would love to get more Cobb Vanth. We saw him at the end in the back to tank.
Yes.
And Cad Bane, when he was stabbed with the gaffy stick, he still had that light on his chest that continued to blink. It never stopped. So a lot of people believe that his life support system or whatever was still working at that point and that he survived. So we could... this is another loose end that Lucasfilm has set up to come back to in a future story that they're never going to tie up because they're going to learn the wrong lesson. They're going to say, oh, no one really liked the Book of Boba Fett. We shouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. But it's like, no, people love Boba Fett. They just didn't like how you did this show at all. Yeah. People loved Cobb Vanth. People loved Cad Bane. People loved Black Chrysanthemum. Like, by all means, give us more of those characters.
But going back real quick and then finishing that thought up was like, does it not make sense to have a little bit more character arc for Boba Fett instead of just him getting with the Tuskens and all of a sudden being a completely different character than we know him to be kind of in Return of the Jedi? He's just completely different. Like, doesn't it make sense to give a little bit of like gradient to it? You know, like give me that a little bit so I'm like, okay, he's still kind of a ruthless killer. Cad Bane says that, but we never see it because all of a sudden he wakes up and he's all of a sudden kind of a good guy, and then he is all of a sudden in the Tusken Raider robes in the next episode.
All right, I'm getting too antsy because this is touching on too many of my weaknesses, so I'm just going to start running through them real quick.
With that being said, as a disclaimer, hire us Lucasfilm and don't take us too harsh.
I like the show.
I think the name. We'll start with that. The name is clearly a holdover for an idea that did not pan out.
Buckle up, folks. We're going back to the name.
The Book of Boba
Day
Fett.
one.
We already have Andor, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan. Why was this called The Book of Boba Fett? Clearly, like we were talking about before, about just too many cooks in the kitchen, too many writers had their hands in the pot or whatever. That happened with the name. At some point, they named it this for a specific reason, and that reason just clearly did not pan out.
Because it was going to be Mandalorian Season 3, and Chapter 16 of The Mandalorian was going to be the end of the Book of Din Djarin.
Yeah, but they could have changed that name.
They could have, but
exactly. Just call it Boba Fett.
They were just talking about this at Lucasfilm since probably 2017, that we're going to have a series called The Mandalorian, and it's going to be several Mandalorians. First, it's going to be like a book about Din Djarin, then it'll be a book about Boba Fett, and then a book about Bo-Katan,
yeah, and when it was pitched, that's a great idea. The problem is they don't have anyone supervising who was able to like at least see the final product or enough of it to go back and say like, hey, let's revisit the name. Why did we call this? Because a lot of stuff has changed since then. When they need to have a little bit of quality control to be like, hold on, let's real quick, just tie up some loose ends here.
Do you think
another from a
J.J. Abrams got a hold of Book of Boba Fett Season 2 that we would find out that that's action at Boba Fett and that's just a clone of Boba Fett?
No, I don't.
I'm not actually being serious. Why are you pausing for that long, Maxwell?
Because I didn't know if I wanted to like that or not. I was like, They could redo Boba Fett. No,
I know, but I had to.
no, don't do
I was
that.
like,
And then the other kind of meta thing for me was the fact that it's just 7 episodes. Like, I know that's a stupid thing to
No,
pick
no.
up on, but that's weird, right? Something at some point went wrong in there.
yep.
It's because they had to add 2 more episodes about Mando and Grogu.
So they only had 5 episodes?
Yeah, no, there's something. I think that's what I'm saying. I think
What's
there
wrong
was
with
a
5? What do you
No,
mean?
it's
You want
not
you
a
want it to
TV
be
show.
6?
That's weird.
8 to 10 is like it's always 8 to 10 episodes. It's 7. If you're doing 7 episodes, something weird happened. Obviously, with Kenobi, we know something weird happened is because it was supposed to be a movie and they kind of reworked it and they reworked it again. It's like 6 episodes, right? So it's like, yeah, that makes sense. So 6 episodes makes sense. 7 episodes is like something got cut. And that's and then added, right? So it's whether Boba Fett had a whole new arc and then they decided not to do that, or maybe that's why the Tusken Raider scenes are only in the first 2 episodes and not kind of throughout, or just the first episode. I have a feeling something happened and then they had to cut it by an episode because 7 is such a weird one to do. It's so weird.
That is so arbitrary. You know so much more about the TV industry than I do, so I'll defer to your expertise that it is odd, but who cares? Like, it's 7 episodes, so what? Like, you just want it to be 8 just because that's what you're experienced with?
I think if they were able to do 8 with I don't think it's I don't even care that it's 7. It's just like just gives me a clue that something happened and that the show was just leading to like my tie-in maybe with Solo or whatever.
Matt's relying on his industry experience here by saying that 7 is not a standard industry number for a TV show, even though it's straight to streaming.
That is so random. That's like I don't see why it matters. Like, would you have been more happy if they had another random episode about Mandalorian that had nothing to do with Boba Fett, just so it was 8 episodes?
No, I'd be happier if this was just better planned and thought through and executed as one single vision as opposed to piecemeal 100 different visions.
It's not that it's 7 episodes, which is the hang up. It's just I think that's just a clue that's like, oh, something happened, and that's why I'm like, did they rewrite it because
we know something happened.
7 episodes in and of itself isn't the problem. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it's just an
All right, so we can cut that. 7 episodes, not a problem.
No, it is indicative that something went wrong.
It's a clue to a bigger problem.
We don't need clues to this problem. We all saw the show. We know it was poorly written.
Please hire us.
So we'll get into the show now. The flashbacks, everything.
Now we're getting into the show.
Everything with the Sand People was wasted. There was no point to the flashbacks. Boba Fett summed up everything that occurred in the flashbacks when he was talking to Fennec Shand.
Oh, he
when
did
he
at
said,
the campfire.
I was left for dead in the sands of Tatooine, like you. I was rescued by the Sand People. They took me in and treated me as one of their own. We don't need anything that we saw in the flashbacks based on that summary, but since we did, we know that this is absolutely false. That is not what we saw happen with our own eyes. This is textbook Stockholm Syndrome.
Usually it's show, not tell. He told us, and I did not need to see it.
Yeah.
With that being said, Luke and I were talking. You want to take it? Because he did it perfectly for some reason, not knowing the conversation, I feel like.
What conversation?
No, he said it normally. We were
Did
talking,
he? I
we were
thought
talking about how, for whatever reason, Tamora Morrison has like, I don't know how to grade accents, but he has like a 5 out of 10 New Zealand accent, except for when he says Tatooine, when he just ups it to 11 out of 10, and he says Tatooine.
But
he does that with his name too, because also another just kind of weird thing that jumped out to me was at one point in the show he's told Fennec Shand, I think it was when they were trying to break into Jabba's palace, Bibs at the time, that there's advantages to people thinking you're dead. Yet the entire show he's constantly telling people who he is, because the most common line in that entire show was Tem saying, "I am Boba Fett," and Boba Fett's another one where I feel like he really cranks up the accent there. But it was just textbook Stockholm Syndrome. The only reason he cooperated with the Tuskens was because he was imprisoned in essentially a Tusken labor camp. And then we have to talk about
they became
the character
friends.
development.
That's not fair. I disagree with that assessment also.
That is 100% Stockholm
He was
Syndrome.
part of the tribe. They gave him the little nose scorpion, and he got to build a gaffy stick.
And then we talk about like the whole reason for it and like what was the message, what did he learn, what was the character development. And to me, like I said, it's that he is stronger as a tribe. And that kind of makes sense, but when Cad Bane is about to kill Boba and he says, "Consider this my final lesson, look out for yourself, anything else is weakness," then Boba kills Cad with the gaffy stick from the Tuskens, right? And to me, that kind of, like we said earlier, that solidifies that's the message. You're stronger as a tribe, not by yourself. But is that the lesson that he should have learned from his experience with the Tuskens? Because they were already a tribe and they were wiped out. The only reason Boba lived was because he was off by himself. And he himself...
That's not fair.
Luke's like, I'm going to rewatch it for the 3rd time and hate it now.
Boba himself says he got the Tuskens wiped out by a Nikto speeder gang. So isn't the opposite lesson what he should have learned? Wouldn't that be a better backstory for someone who has become a lone wolf?
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's like a backstory as to why Boba Fett refuses to work with anyone else. That should have been like the opposite of the lesson that he actually learned, which is weird to me.
Yeah, I thought maybe like one of the Tuskens, like the warrior with the dreadlocks, could have survived or something, or the kid. Why was there a kid?
The entire
if he's just going to get slaughtered along with the rest of them.
The entire that's true. The entire first 2 episodes, Matt and I kept talking about it, and we were like, oh, because at the end he's going to rally all of his allies, and the Tuskens are going to also come help save the day and everything. And then that didn't pan out. And then it's a weird choice to use these Tuskens anyway, because up until this point, what do we know of the Tuskens? Like they pillage towns, they kidnap people, they torture them.
Pillage village.
They pillage villages.
Not all Tuskens are like that. You're generalizing.
Yes, they are.
The Tuskens
this show
even say-
solidified it. Even
No,
when Boba was agreeing with them and this innocent train was trying to pass through their territory, they immediately took out guns. They immediately took out guns, went to a ridge, and tried shooting at them. And lo and behold, they shot back because they were defending themselves.
This was not the first encounter with this train. We do not know that they instigated the rivalry between
What do we
the
know
planks.
about the Tuskens? Think of the Tuskens, everything we know from A New Hope, from The Phantom Menace, during the pod race scenes when they're just taking pot shots at the pod racers.
They say in this show, though, that there are different tribes of Tuskens. Some survive by raiding and pillaging, and some live off the land. And they say that
Clearly, they're raiding and pillaging. They kidnapped these 2 people. Boba Fett was kidnapped. He was tied, and they were forced him to work in a labor camp with this Rodian.
Something that I was, again, looking into some people's reviews of Book of Boba Fett, and people loved the Tusken stuff, which is odd to me because I feel like there's 2 things, and this show is, a lot of it is exploring things that we don't know, but we already know of, right? So it's like, Boba Fett himself. We're getting a lot more in-depth knowledge of who this character is versus, we've known him forever, and we don't know much about him. The same thing with the Tuskens is that I feel like we've known them forever, obviously, they're in A New Hope, and we don't know much about them. They're in New Hope, and obviously they're in Phantom and, and Revenge, and I feel like we don't, or is it Attack? It doesn't matter. It's Revenge.
No,
the
Attack.
Tuskens are an attack.
Okay, it's an Attack. Yeah, it is an Attack. So then, I feel like I think it's a bit of a misstep in 2 things. It's like I don't think we need to know everything about every single, species or character, and I think that's a bit of a misstep in the fact of like we almost know too much about Boba Fett now. We know too much about the Tusken Raiders. I'm not sure if we know too much. I think it was just handled in a very odd way. Now we kind of have that explored out a little bit, but I feel like it is a bit of just a misstep of thinking that every single person needs to know every little nook and cranny of every single thing. With that being said, I like Rogue One, so that's kind of,
I know. That's just because there's examples of times when you don't like that. People always say that stuff is better left as a mystery, but like look at the Mandalorian culture and how cool that was as a mystery. And then the Mandalorian show came out, and it's super cool when we know every single detail about their history and all of the lore. Like if that went even a little bit worse, people would be saying the exact same thing, that it should have just been left as a mystery. If it's done well, it's more exciting to see stuff explained. And the Tuskens, it was so interesting to see it all explained, because I do like the Tusken arc. I've always wondered how they survived. The Black Melon stuff was cool. The nose bug that takes you to get your gaffy stick from some weird tree, that was really exciting, because I always wondered where they get sticks in a desert.
I'm thinking now, it's like they're anti-drug, and yet they're tripping left and right. That's insane.
Yeah.
Are the Tuskens anti-drug? The Tuskens probably didn't have a problem with the spice trade.
No, they just had problem because somebody was going across their land. They were the essential to a crotchety old man saying, "Get off my lawn!" But instead of shaking their canes at him, they were shooting at him.
They have an ancestral right to the Dune Sea. You are being so unfair.
All right. What else? So what else did he learn from the Tuskens? Because Fennec Shand said living with the Tuskens has made you soft. How did that make him soft of everything that we saw? Clearly it did, because he has a very weak stomach for crime as a self-declared crime lord and a huge heart for others. He cares about what he says are his people in his town. Which doesn't make sense. How is this his town? When did it become his town?
Which
he
he instantly gives up at the end of the show.
Yeah. He claims to be a crime lord, but he is opposed to spice running and gouging water prices. So what crime is he okay with that he is lording over exactly?
Yeah, calling himself a crime lord, because I was wondering if that was going to come up on my rewatch, because people always talk about Boba Fett as a crime lord in this show, and I'm like, well, he's not a crime lord. He's just kind of seizing control of the city to make it
Claims
prosper.
himself to be a crime lord.
He does refer to himself as a crime lord once.
But no drugs.
Yeah.
No
And no price
drugs, no price
gouging. It's like,
gouging.
whoa. Okay.
Robert Rodriguez had a whole sex trafficking storyline they cut.
Yeah. That was where he drew the line.
They're like, okay, we got to throw in Mandalorian to lighten this thing up.
It's based on, it sounds like he just wanted to be the mayor. which they have. And he could just run for office. And he actually cares about the town and is apparently more anti-crime than the actual mayor who is working with the Pikes. So it seems to me like he has a legitimate shot of winning. I think he should just run for office at that point.
Yeah.
But another thing that made no sense was in one of the flashbacks, Boba said he wants to kill that bloated pig who double-crossed me and take his throne, alluding to Bib Fortuna.
Who's not?
How does he know he's fat, first
Yeah.
off? He's never seen him yet. And did Bib double-cross him? Did he cross him first to ever even double back? Like, what's the story between Boba and Bib? Like, that's just a line that sounds cool but makes no sense.
Maybe there's a whole Bib Fortuna Star Wars story waiting to find out that he was a mole with the rebellion, helping Luke Skywalker, and he got everyone together on the sail barge, and then
And his best
rigged
friend
it
is
to
Hazel.
explode, and then stayed back at the palace for some reason.
Until-
wasn't Bib Fortuna on the sail barge? He must not have been, but I could.
No, he wasn't on the sail barge.
Interesting.
Or-
I thought he was too, actually.
I can kind of picture him on the sail barge, but he obviously survived.
Yeah. I wonder how that
Cut
did
this.
that,
We got to rewatch Return of the Jedi before we talk about it.
all right. And then let's talk about some motivation. So what was Fennec's motivation to stay with Boba? She was thankful for
Yeah, she
for
just
Boba
says,
Fett
"I'll stick
saving him.
around."
Yeah. But then she said she'll help him get his ship back, and then she's gone. And then the only thing else that he did was wrongfully massacre a Nikto speeder gang, which Fennec had previously said was unlikely that they were the ones to wipe out the Tuskens.
Oh, they were still villains. That's not
And
uncalled for.
he nearly got Fennec killed by blowing up the Sarlacc pit trying to find his armor. Where in there did Fennec think, you know what? I'm going to see this through. I'm going to stick around for a little bit. It didn't make sense.
Yeah, I won't
the
defend
mods.
Fennec. Yeah, that's
We already
fair.
talked about the mods.
I'll
no
stick
one really liked
around
the
for a
mods.
little bit is like the worst sentence you can. I feel like you're at a party. You're with all your friends. All your friends leave, and there's that one weird person that you kind of know, and then you're like, oh, all right, well, yeah, it was good seeing you. Yeah, I think I'll stick around. And you're like,
Okay.
God damn it.
Read the room,
Yeah,
Fennec.
read the room. Exactly. It's like, I'll stick around is the funniest way to be like, yeah,
Boba's just sighing. I know I'm starting a tribe, but like not with you.
could you not?
Could you not? We already talked about the mods, but I didn't like them story-wise, action-wise, or aesthetically.
I will say aesthetically, I was bothered on my rewatch. The mods are referred to by Lorthopeel as half human, half machine, but boy, they aren't. They all have like one minor modification.
Correct. Like an eighth at most.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say the mods, like,
It's
even if
good
you
idea, bad execution.
correct, even if you
Yeah.
placed them on Coruscant, I don't want to see them again.
No, I agree.
They're
I
one of
agree.
the few things in Star Wars that I would say I'm okay with never seeing again.
What's the worst part is the idea is cool.
Yeah, the idea.
Everything you just said, again, on paper, we have a crooked mayor. We have half robots, half humans that are called mods. Everything is, everything is.
who are built by Thundercat.
Yes, who built by Thundercat. It's like, yeah, I like the things you are saying.
That being said, if Cobb Vanth comes back as a mod and lays claim to the mod gang as his own, I'm here for it.
What's with Thundercat and Flea being in Star Wars? Who's just the
They like
random?
bass.
Yeah, who's the random bass lover at Lucasfilm who's like, oh, you know who we should get for this role? That would be perfect.
As Filoni's over there in like a wolf cowl playing bass.
Yeah. None of the politics worked. Boba Fett never made any sort of offers or provided any information on why the three families working with him were in their interest. In fact, they said they made money off of the Pike spice trade, so the compromise they reached was to just remain neutral. But why would they? Like, they said, like, we benefit nothing from you, and we do get benefit from the spice trade. So it didn't work out, and then they double-crossed them, and it's like, yeah, of course they did. But whatever.
Yeah.
The assassination attempt on Boba, the assassin clearly said he was sent by the mayor, and the mayor just flat out denies and tries to blame the twins, whose motivation and plans are also unclear. They threaten Boba that they are laying claim to this territory because it's Jabba's, their cousin's territory, and Boba says, you'll have to kill me for it. And then they walk away because they say bloodshed is bad for business. And then they send Chrysanthemum to kill Boba, and when he fails, they give him a Rancor and leave the planet. Because again,
you got the order wrong. They don't agree to leave until after the Black Chrysanthemum thing. They send Black Chrysanthemum before they whatever yield the territory to Boba.
Matt.
yeah, no, they were talking in the street. And Boba Fett said, you're going to have to kill me for it. And then they walked away. That was the first time.
Then they
There's
walk
like
away right
two
there. But they
times
say,
where
like,
they
you
say
better-
something to the extent of war is bad for business.
They walk away, but they say you better sleep lightly. Like they imply that it's not over then.
Okay. And then, so they send Chrysanthemum, that fails, and then they're like, all right, our bad. Here's a Rancor, we're leaving.
Max, as me and you both are very passive, tell me you wouldn't do the same thing. Leave the Rancor and just get out of there.
I'm not a crime lord trying to steal a territory from somebody else.
Neither is Boba Fett, but
I don't
he's
think
trying.
I don't think those people tend to be that passive aggressive. I think they're a little more aggressive. Okay, so the whole purpose of the twin storyline was to provide Boba with Black Chrysanthemum and a Rancor, and to maybe have the audience think for a second that they're behind all this and it's not the mayor.
One of my least favorite lines in the whole show is Boba Fett going up to Black Chrysanthemum and be like, "Looks like you need a job." It's like,
I didn't mind that.
really?
It's not a line, but the worst part with Black Chrysanthemum was when they just let him go outside of the palace, and you get a wide shot of him just jogging off into the distance.
We laughed so hard on that. We're like, what?
Yeah,
That's like
I
the
forgot about
like just zoom in on Boba in that moment. Like, don't show us like just the actor like looking around like, all right, I guess I'll just start jogging.
that does look silly. It's like the scene in Kenobi where the same exact thing happens when Vader confronts him and then Obi-Wan just jogs off screen in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, like just there's gotta be a
like,
better
that
way of
is not as
shooting
cool as
that.
you think it looks.
Some of the action was a little weird. Robert Rodriguez clearly has this style where he occasionally likes to like slow things down and then quickly speed them up again. And if it's not an editing trick, he'll like tell his actors to like hold a position for a split second before moving again. Like the mod spin is a big one. And
I
it just
love
kind of
that spin.
highlights how silly it is.
That flourish.
And another one that Matt always brings up is when Boba uses the knee rocket.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's like an editing thing, but like he definitely like lifts his knee to shoot the rocket, and then he just like holds it there for a second too long, and then he goes back to fighting.
I love that too. You just want to dislike this show. That
No,
all that
I
stuff
don't.
looks cool.
I just think it would be cooler to see that in like one fluid motion. Like it just looks like he's like kicking in the air and like shooting knee rockets
It's
and
like he got
stuff.
stuck. Shit.
I don't even know what you're talking about. I did not see that at all.
And then the way they also shot Chrysanthemum like a monster instead of a character, with a lot of the dramatic like slow-mos and like the steep angles, like always like looking way up at him. Like I feel like Robert Rodriguez was very clearly influenced by three things in Book of Boba Fett, and it's like spaghetti westerns, feudal Japan, and monster movies. And it makes sense because those are like a lot of like early cinema. And when Jon Favreau was pitching Mandalorian to Lucasfilm, he originally said that he doesn't want to make something inspired by Star Wars. He wants to be inspired by the same things that inspired George. So it makes sense.
George who? Sorry.
Who's this, George?
Sorry,
So it
both of you.
it makes sense that he's inspired by those things, especially because he's already worked with John on The Mandalorian, so like he knows like those are the things that they're looking for. But it was weird to me. Like Chrysanthemum is a character, and like they just made him look more like a monster in certain shots than others, and it was just it was kind of weird. And then everything else we already discussed. So that's it. That's the end. That's the end of my list. Those are my thoughts.
I would like to talk about my cons. They are not so nitpicky about every single writing decision that we already agreed the writing is bad on, and so I won't harp on that much more than Max already blessed us with.
No, I don't think it's nitpicking. What I don't like is when people just make generalizations and without backing it up. I
That's
try
true. You are
to
backing it up.
come in
Yeah.
with like a specific example to say.
Yeah,
This
I
is what I'm
also
talking about.
I think you did a really good job on that. And not that I don't think you did a nearly as good a job, but I tried to also have some sort of constructive criticism with mine as well, my negatives, because I
You
think
do a good job too. Don't
Thank
sell
you.
yourself short.
because I again we all like Star Wars, and this is just like a weird one, like that. It's like
Yeah.
we've never really crossed before, and it's like again the things weren't really paid off for it, but it's like and again
As a show, it is undeniably flawed
Yeah.
severely. But as like just raw Star Wars content, it's all really good.
Yeah.
Like it's really weird and out of pocket to have these 2 episodes of The Mandalorian in the middle, but they're 2 incredible episodes of The Mandalorian.
They are. I think something I'd be really interested in seeing, like when when you show your guys like kids this stuff and stuff. I feel like this might be like a favorite for like potentially, right? Because it's like
To show a kid.
yes,
I agree. I thought of that as I was watching it because Luke and I have a 5-year-old nephew who loves Star Wars and he loves Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to show this to him relatively early on, just because it shows Boba Fett as a
that's
good guy.
Huge mistake. Oh my god.
I was watching the last episode today, and my son was. I think he was actually, for the first time, he's 16 months, so he doesn't really know Boba Fett, but he was grabbing his Boba Fett toy while I was watching, and I was shouting Boba Fett, and I was like hooting and hollering because the last episode is so high octane and exciting.
It's
and he was hooting and hollering with me. It was a lot of fun. I can't wait to show this to my son.
Robert Rodriguez being inspired by monster movies did also that was a positive, specifically with the Rancor in the last episode when you
Yeah.
got that awesome shot of Boba Fett. Like the camera like looks up at the Rancor and like you slowly see Boba Fett pop up over the head of the Rancor. Oh, that's such a cool shot.
All the Rancor stuff is really cool. The one flaw that I would like to bring up that you guys haven't yet, which I'm surprised there's any, but what I was really looking for in this show is a bridging between prequel era Boba Fett and original trilogy era Boba Fett and current day Boba Fett.
Because they hint at it so
They do.
much.
It opens up with those flashbacks
Yeah.
of Camino, and I was so here for it. I was so excited
agree.
to see those. And then you see like Boba Fett on Geonosis to get it, picking up the helmet, and they
Love
even
it.
have an added shot. I don't know if
Yep.
that was like a deleted shot or something, or if they did that digitally. I don't know, but it's super cool. But then it just like never comes up.
No.
And like they talk about in the water gouging scene, Boba Fett's like, "Oh, I grew up in a place surrounded by water," and it's like, sick, bro. Like,
I thought
what
the same
of it?
thing. That's just bad writing. It was like, yeah, he threw that line out there, and everyone's like, "Piss off, mate!"
Yeah,
Like,
right.
He just like looks at the camera, just happy.
And then
No.
again at the end with
No,
Cad
so
Bane,
thirsty.
it's interesting how they're going to bring in Cad Bane and relate it back to Boba Fett, because the scenes with Cad Bane and Boba Fett in the Clone Wars were never finished and released because that final shootout is like it's out there on YouTube or wherever of like unfinished footage, and Boba Fett gets his armor as a young kid or teen, and he has a showdown with Cad Bane, and they shoot each other, and Boba Fett gets the dent in his helmet, and
Yeah.
Cad Bane gets a bullet in the head, and then when we see him in the Bad Batch, he's got that metal plate on his head, and in the Book of Boba Fett, he's got that metal plate on his head. And they like reference that with those design choices, and Boba Fett says like, "I'm not a kid anymore" in the final confrontation, and it's like that stuff is not really explored nearly enough, and
I agree.
not to mention just in this show, like in Star Wars canon before this, there's not really enough to assume the audience knows about that. Like
Yep.
we're big into this, and
Yeah.
we barely knew
Yes.
it.
And honestly,
they're
the
bridging the line between headcanon and canon
Yes.
because we can draw in on that and be like, oh well, I know in this unused footage from the Clone Wars that this happened,
Yep.
but they hinted at it so much in the Book of Boba Fett that we could be like, that probably happened,
Yep.
but
Also, Boba Fett, the last person who should say I'm not a kid anymore. It's glaringly obvious that the man is not a child.
Yeah. I found some more pros in my notes. A BD droid in Pelimato's gang. That's awesome. First live action scene of a BD droid. First appearance in Jedi Fallen Order, BD1.
Oh, yeah.
Super great droid design. It looks and acts like a puppy. That's exactly what everyone always wanted from a droid. That was a lot of fun to see. And in episode 4, the first Mandalorian episode, Pelimato talks about how the Pikes have caused everything to go to hell in the first Mando episode, episode 4. And so it's not completely unrelated. we do have that one little hint of a through line through even the standalone episodes.
So I actually have a confession to make. In my rewatch, I was kind of rushing to get through it. I did not even rewatch episode 5, the first episode
5
with
and
the
6.
Mandalorian,
Yeah.
because I knew that it just has zero bearing on the plot. I knew that it was just 100% Mandalorian. Boba Fett never makes an appearance, so I was like, I'm just going to skip this episode. And then the next one also has a good deal of Mandalorian, and it was funny when I was watching it and he was flying in the N1, it occurred to me that that was what the previous episode was about. And I was like, oh my gosh, I completely forgot that was what the Book of Boba Fett, what Din Djarin was doing in the Book of Boba Fett for like a whole episode was building that ship, and it just like reminded me how out of place it is. But
While on the one hand, it is fair to skip those 2 episodes on a rewatch because it does have nothing to do with the plot, it's still 2 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett, and they're 2 really good episodes.
yeah, I'm not going to say anything bad about it. That's not even the best part of the Book of Boba Fett. That's probably some of the best Mandalorian content we get.
Yep.
That being said, because it's structured like that, I think this show will age like milk. It is not going to be nice coming back in 6 years and watching these 2 episodes of The Mandalorian that take place between episodes or between seasons 2 and 3. By then, there will be 6 seasons of The Mandalorian.
Yep.
It reminds me of the CW Arrowverse. Like, I used to be into that, and they would have a crossover every year.
Yeah.
And as it went on, there were like 3, 4, 5, 6 shows that all had a crossover, and I would like just be wanting to watch The Flash or Arrow because they were the ones I watched, and one episode every season would be completely unrelated. And it was like, what is going on? And I really don't want that to happen with Star Wars, but it seems like it already has.
I do miss that kind of like that like early 2000s like CW type crossover event of the decade or whatever of the year, the decade.
The Fairly Odd Parents and Jimmy Neutron crossover event.
Stuff
I know
like
what you're talking
yeah,
about.
I do.
Yeah, clearly. That's the one.
I do like that.
Animation styles mixed.
Yeah, I do like that kind of stuff. I miss that kind of stuff. The problem with it, Star Wars, in this particular instance, is that there was no lead up or hype or anything to it. It was just like, watching it, that's the problem with Star Wars. A lot of the time, modern day Star Wars is that it's confusing.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what are the expectations? Give
Matt-
me a commercial that says like, you'll never believe what. I mean, I don't know. That sounds cheesy, like the CW old commercials, but it's just like the expectations of filmmakers versus audience, and they have to be aligned, and they are not aligned.
Yeah.
No matter how great they are.
I'm sure they're correct in assuming that every single person that watched the Book of Boba Fett had watched the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian first. But like, shoot for the stars. Don't make it be that reality. You know, like hope that they haven't.
Matt and I watched this one every week as it was coming out, and we would get together. It was probably like 8 or 9 o'clock. It was kind of late. So by that point, some people would have already seen it because it's one of my biggest pet peeves when a new Star Wars show is coming out and Luke's texting me at like 10 a.m. like, hey, did you watch it yet? And I'm like, no, like I just sat down for work. But I remember when that episode came out, I think it was you, maybe it was somebody else, but they were like, oh, this is definitely by far like the best episode of Boba Fett. And I was so pumped for it. And then we watched it and we were like, yeah, this is incredible. And then we had that, like, that sad realization of like, but it's Boba Fett's not in it.
Right.
Like as soon as like Matt said, like 20 minutes in, we kind of had that conversation of like, oh, he's not going to be in it at all. is he? That's why people like this episode.
It's not happening.
That episode also gives well, it's the second one when Mando goes to see Grogu with the chainmail armor. That gives big absent boomer dad who can't feel emotions, who wants to connect with his son. He just walks into his room. Hey, slugger, I got you a baseball mitt. Thought we might have a catch.
Go away, Dad. I'm playing my games.
Grogu's sitting here doing backflips, learning to use the Force, and he's like, okay, armor, cool. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
Thanks, bud. There's something about Luke in that scene which it is a little odd. I think some people were like, oh, it completely changes Luke Skywalker and kind of his thought of like being a Jedi, of having to choose between being a Jedi and also or being a Mandalorian, which is, you know, being a full Jedi, which I feel like Luke Skywalker is inherently a new brand of Jedi where he's not following that stuff, and he is who he is because he trusted his gut and he has his group of friends and things too. With that being said, I don't think that's entirely true, because I think we see one instance of this when he's giving Grogu a choice, but Grogu never had a choice really before. You know, Din Djarin gave him to Luke to go train for what he thought was the better. But I think Luke giving Grogu that option to go is very much Luke Skywalker. I don't think it is a Luke Skywalker has turned into the old ways of the Jedi. I think showing him who he is as a teacher is, yes, you should decide just like I did.
Yeah. I never heard any qualms with the Luke Skywalker bits.
I feel dumb.
I quite like all the Luke Skywalker parts. And
I heard some criticism about it.
Yeah.
Like he's forcing it to be like a binary and everything. Like, oh, you can only do one.
Yeah. But I don't see it like that though.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about effects, digital, practical, the difference, so which ones are better. This show has some of the best digital effects and some of the best practical effects. Cad Bane looks incredible,
I think
and he's
so
all
too.
practical, and they are able to do him talking,
Yeah,
and they do
perfectly.
it practically, and it looks good.
It looks scary. Like he freaks me out
I
legitimately.
think that is the more so than even his light blinking after he gets stabbed. I think the fact that they put so much effort into that prosthetic and have it working so well is more indicative that he will come back, because they're not just going to shelve that. It works too good.
Yeah.
Someone came up, hey, Robert, we read the script, man. We saw that you wanted to kill this character. We just put like a bunch of time and money into this guy. We need to bring him back at some point. Like, we'll just have like a blinking light stay on. Okay, cool. Yes, I agree with that. And when he moves his lips, they articulate to the words perfectly. That's huge. We just talked about how that's like a biggest pet peeve of ours, when obviously practical effects mouths do not move along with the words, which is still a problem with the who is it? The Trandoshans.
Yeah.
And the the Klatooinians were kind of using their real mouths to an extent.
The Klatooinians
are a
looked
little
good.
better, yeah.
And the Pikes didn't look that great.
No, the Pikes. That's what I'm thinking of. The Pikes were not good, and then the other ones, the Aqualish, didn't even. I don't think they spoke basic. So
Right, yeah, and that's easier. And the Ithorian too.
the Ithorian looked great. I love that.
Mm-hmm. And that's such a good way to have him talk in an alien language and like out the side of his neck perfectly, and that makes sense because he just has the translator.
It's really cool.
Do you have any more positives or negatives, Luke?
Nope, I think I'm all tapped
All
out.
right.
Good show, far better on a rewatch.
Let's real quick rank it on a scale of 1 to 10.
Exactly what I was going to ask too. And I was going to
8 out of
Oh.
10.
8. That's I
For
agree.
all those negatives,
Oh man.
Yeah.
Beyond
I need to see what you think is a 7.
well, he gave a game he will never play again, like a 9.
Right,
Yeah,
I know. It's because it's Star Wars. Like, do you want me to rate it out of just all the Star Wars content we've ever gotten? It's
Yes.
lower. I'd give that probably like a
Wait, how do you
5.
rate things? That's how I always rate things all together. It's like, oh yeah, this is
Luke's ranking system.
this is
just
my
makes 0
gold
sense to me.
standard. How does it rank to the gold standard of anything?
But what's the gold standard? The gold standard
You're-
of Star Wars or the gold standard of TV?
Whatever you want. You personally,
Well,
I think it's for me. It's the same.
yeah.
But I mean, I love Star Wars, so it's going to be. I'm going to enjoy it in a different way. But I mean, I can still rank it on a harsher, or I can still grade with a critical eye.
I agree because things can be different, right? Like obviously, it's hard to say like, oh, like Breaking Bad and The Office are two of my favorite shows of all time,
But they are.
but they are, yeah. And it's like you can't compare the two; they're just polar opposites from each other, but they
Yeah.
can still be like 10 out of 10s.
I know. I mean, I'm not grading it as like a technical TV show. I'm grading it like as
Star
how
Wars.
much I like how much I like this TV show. Like I really like the show Dexter,
Me too.
but I would give that probably like a 7 or an 8. And it's obviously way better made than the Book of Boba Fett. But if you just ask
Depending
me
what season.
which show I like better, it's the Book of Boba Fett because it has Boba Fett and and the world that I love and all these unique creatures and great lore. So if you want me to rate it just in a world where only Star Wars existed and nothing else, I would give it more like a 5 or a 6.
Oh damn! All right, so that's a significant drop. Beyond rating it out of 10 as well, because I wanted to do the same thing and I want you to do the same thing. But has your list changed now in the TV shows?
I went and looked at it again because
Yes.
I liked it so much better on rewatch, and no.
Yeah,
I wanted it to.
The
but
top 6 are. There's no comparing.
Right.
I'm just gonna like Bad Batch better than Book of Boba Fett. There's just no way about it.
Mhm.
Like, there's no way. Maxwell?
I ranked Book of Boba Fett last on my TV show list,
Yes.
and it has not changed it.
no,
all
not
right.
even an 8. I thought we were going
I
to squeak
thought we
an
were
8.
gonna get an 8 too.
No,
Luke.
well, maybe I have to go back and rewatch Resistance first before I say I changed that. But
Good
as a
plug for our future episode because we're gonna.
Yes, sometime after Ahsoka. So see us in December, folks.
but I would give it maybe like a 3 out of 10.
Wow, dang, that is harsh. I don't know if I think I give like The Room a 2 out of 10, and that's like the one, like the worst
No, that's
movie
like
ever made.
What's below The Room then? That has to be a 0.
Birdemic is like a 1.
Okay, I've never seen Birdemic.
I
don't know.
rarely give. I'm a little bit of a sucker. I feel like the sweet spot. Like if I don't like something, it'll get a 5 and like a 5 and below. But like if it's technically, it was like this is technically made well. I enjoyed some scenes. I can find something in it. I'll give it like a 6. And so Boba Fett for me is a 7. I think it's technically made well. I think some of the shots are great. I think, like you said, with the VFX, we get some great practical effects. We do get 2 great Mando episodes.
It's really just the writing that's not good, which is only one part of filmmaking, and so it's tough that it's such a significant part to lower it so much.
Yeah,
But
it's
just
just the plot
Yeah, it's just
I know.
it's the chain. That's like a really big one though. You know what I mean?
It is.
and the character development.
Yeah,
and-
it's a
No, we like the character development.
No,
We
it
talked
doesn't
about
make
that.
sense.
There is none.
I like the
Boba
character
Fett's lesson
development.
should have been that he
There
works
is
better
some.
as a lone
You cannot
wolf.
say there is none. It happens with the Tusken arc.
There-
You
there's-
cannot say that his character does not develop through that scene. You cannot like it, and you cannot like the way it's structured in the series, but it's there.
No, I don't think it is. He just is all of a sudden a good guy.
Okay, from not a writing perspective, just a technical standpoint, another thing I forgot to say was the montages. There's some weird montages where it's like it just feels like 10 minutes has passed. Like it feels like they clearly shot this to be a montage, so they just shot the whole thing in like a 10-minute spree or something. You know what I mean? There was the montage when he was building the gaffy stick,
Yeah.
and then there was another montage.
Oh, that's got to be a montage. You can't build a gaffy stick in real time. How else
No,
could you
but I'm
do
just
it?
saying, like the montage, just like it felt very like think of like Breaking Bad, right? Like every time they make the meth, and like you get like a lot of like cool shots like intercut with it. Like the montage of him building the gaffy stick just felt like okay, and then just fast forward 10 minutes and just play 2 seconds there. Okay, fast forward another 10 minutes. Like there was no like,
Rhythm to it.
yeah, I don't know if rhythm's the right word, but like do you know what I'm
Yeah.
what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like there was
I
no
think you guys are crazy.
there was
That
no
was- that was-
artistry to it.
Yeah.
I
That
don't
was
know.
such
Like
a
they could've-
standard montage.
It's like
He
they
was
filmed-
building a gaffy stick. What do
think-
you want from it?
I think the thing is maybe what you're pointing out is that they filmed it probably of him actually doing it, assembling it together, probably in real time, and then they cut it down instead of purposely being like, okay, we only can show this shot being put together. We're only showing this shot purposely, like
Are you
storyboarded.
implying
and
that Tamora Morrison built a gaffy stick in real life?
if they were like, I don't know, if they were like just like assembling it, or like same thing with like the putting on the robes, right? They just dressed Tamora Mortensen, and then they were like,
That scene was silly.
Yes.
They were dressing him like a king going off to battle, and they
Yes.
just put black robes on
so
him.
I think
Which
they
has
like,
got to be so hot. How does not everyone die of heat stroke?
yeah, that's insane. But yeah, I don't know. So,
While we're talking about Tim,
Yes.
let's end the show on a highlight because
wait,
Tamora Morrison.
Let me give my more. Wait,
Oh,
let me,
I'm sorry,
wait, no.
sorry.
I would give it a 7, and it has not moved from my 7 spot in my top TV shows. All right, go on, Max.
I was just gonna say Tamora Morrison is fantastic. He brings a certain type of energy to the character of the character Boba Fett.
Yeah, like after like a big meal, you want to sit on the couch.
No,
no, I'm just kidding.
he when he battles without his helmet on and you can see his facial expressions, he
there.
is really intense and he's really into it, and I can tell that the actor is loving it, and it makes me love it even more.
1000%. I
that's
agree.
great.
Yeah, he is great. I think he's also deserved to be in Star Wars, and I feel like he's put in the legwork, and I feel like I was excited to see him in Obi-Wan for that little bit. I assume we're gonna see him in Ahsoka as well, which is gonna be really cool. So, we all want more Tem. He really wants more Boba Fett, as is making it very apparent. And I do hope they kind of learn their lesson in the fact of, let's do this not even subjectively better or anything. Let's give the people what they want and Tem what he wants as Boba Fett, I think is another good way to put it.
Because Tem is in a very interesting position where he also plays clones, I wonder if there will ever be a point in his career where he's like, you know what? I just want to play Captain Rex. I know I was Jango Fett and Boba Fett. Let's put him on the back burner. I like this character.
I
now.
weirdly think he would be a better Rex, to be honest. I feel like he fits that a little better with his personality and stuff too. Like his personality is very Rex. Like,
I mean, his
Does that
personality,
make-
it's just the way you're acting. Like he's a great Jango Fett 20 years ago, and it's the same guy.
That's true,
I do think Boba Fett being as old as Tamora Morrison is a little weird. Like I don't canonically it's not exactly that age, and I just wish Boba Fett wasn't quite as old. I know he has to be because the actor's that old.
Yeah, they really wrote that.
But
in
Rex
older.
makes sense being older.
Yes,
So
I
I would
agree.
like that more.
And we talk about actors aging and stuff, and that'll be perfect because as time goes on, it'll only be better and better timing for Tamora Morrison to play Rex.
Especially because Rex is going to peacefully die of old age. So that'll look nice in 15 years.
Stay tuned for our Ahsoka theories and predictions, folks.
Nothing bad will happen to that man. He's been through too much.
LT, do you have any force for thought, perchance?
I do have some force for thought. Some of it popped into my head while I was rewatching the Book of Boba Fett, and it comes in the episode where Mando goes to find Grogu, and he lands his new N1 starfighter on that planet, and he sees R2, and R2 takes him to Ahsoka. And I have a new headcanon that R2 greeting him, and he is overwhelmed with seeing this N1 starfighter again. And he looks at it, and he's like, oh my god, that is the starfighter that I met Anakin Skywalker on, or that I took Anakin Skywalker to win the Battle of Naboo, and he just thinks about everything that's happened and everywhere he's been and everyone he's lost, and then he shuts down when Mando's waiting on that bench, and just because he's just having a mental breakdown in his dome, he is just overcome with grief seeing that ship again.
And because
That is
we know,
hilarious.
as we've learned on a previous Force for Thought episode, that R2 did not have his memory wiped after Revenge of the Sith.
Correct.
He
So
is
he remembers all of
very
it.
aware.
R2 should remember that N1 starfighter
Yeah.
very well.
He looks at it and has like war flashbacks.
Man, what a depressing.
It's hilarious.
Just getting beat over there, R2. I'm so sorry.
Luke eventually walks up to R2. He's like, buddy, what's wrong?
All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much for listening. We like Star Wars. We went pretty hard this episode,
Some of us did.
deservedly so. Yes, you can find us on socials. So let us know if you agree or disagree. Again, people don't seem to be rushing to the. Yep.
Let us know after you rewatch it, because a rewatch really did help all of us, and me especially. Like I like the show substantially more on a rewatch,
Yeah.
without the pressure of what it's going to be. Just appreciating it for what it is. Give it a rewatch.
Yeah, and
I
if you
agree.
don't, we don't want your comments. Prove to us that you have rewatched it. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. See you, Sammy.